Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Underwriting assistance is provided by TLC, Oklahoma's leading garden center, Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, Tulsa's source for great gardens, southwoodgardencenter.com. and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing.
Welcome to Oklahoma Gardening. On today's show, host Casey Hentges looks at a plant with spectacular early spring blooms. Then we travel to Tulsa to visit the Community Food Bank of Eastern Oklahoma, where they are working to alleviate food insecurity in the eastern part of the state. Casey has tips for tomato plant shopping, and Barbara Brown tells us the proper places to store different foods for the best flavors.
I love walking through a garden and finding all the shapes that nature has to offer. And we have a plant here that has a very unique shape of a flower. You can see how it got its common name, bleeding heart. Its Latin name is Lampocapnus spectabilis, or was previously known under the genus as Dicentra. But it has these beautiful, delicate, arching branches, and this is a nice shade plant. Like most shade plants, it does prefer a rich, moist soil, but it can be a little sensitive to that moisture, especially in the wintertime. It does not tolerate wet soils at all, and in the summertime, it does not tolerate dry conditions. Typically, this foliage, as it emerged early in the spring, and you can see it's blooming early in the spring as well, this foliage will die back midsummer. But if it suffers from droughts, then that foliage will die back even sooner. Now this particular cultivar is called Gold Heart, and you can see it has beautiful chartreuse foliage, which is a nice pop of color in these shady conditions. Again, it's a great plant and it's got a unique flower that's unlike any other. We are here today at the Community Food Bank of Eastern Oklahoma, and joining us is Eileen Bradshaw, and you're the executive director here. Eileen, can you tell us about this place? We've got a lot of food here, but you guys also serve a lot of people.
Yes, we're glad to have you here today. So this warehouse and other warehouses come together to serve the 24 eastern counties of Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. We serve the equivalent of about 330,000 meals each and every week. So there's that much need, which is kind of astounding.
Yeah, and so your range goes all across eastern Oklahoma?
Yeah, state line to state line, the eastern 24 counties, so okay. All the way down.
So how much does this food turn over? I mean, is this headed out today, or?
Some of it will. It's amazing how quickly food comes in and out of here. We do an average of about, I think, 7.5 warehouse turns each year, and this is about a 78,000 square foot facility. So to give you a little perspective, if we didn't receive any more food, though, this warehouse would be empty in just a matter of weeks.
Wow, and you guys have large refrigerator storage and also freezer storage back there for frozen and other foods. One of the big aspects that you're trying to increase is your fresh food produce. Can you talk about what percentage that makes up in the food you supply, and where does that come from?
Absolutely. We know that for folks who struggle with food insecurity, fresh produce is a lot of time the first thing they have to cut. So we try to put that back in for health reasons. Mm-hmm. Last year, about 38% of what we distributed was fresh, and year-to-date numbers have increased 24% over last year. Wow. It's a deliberate push. We want people to have access, but it can be a challenge too. We are blessed to have big refrigeration units, but not all of our partners are. So sometimes we're working really hard to get it out just in time so that people can get it home and get it on their tables.
And now, of course, obviously, if we have local foods that are being provided, then that gives you a little bit more time to distribute that versus some of the other foods. Is that correct?
That is so correct. The closer to home, we can get the produce, the longer the life, either here or in the homes of the end users. So, local produce is kind of the pearl of great price for us. We get a lot of wonderful produce that gets donated and trucked in from Washington State or Florida, depending, and we're grateful for that. But nothing is quite as precious as the stuff that we get close to home.
And are there certain quantities that somebody can donate, or can home gardeners also donate to you
We
through
love
the plant
home
to grow
gardeners.
and things?
We have gardeners who've been doing that for years, and we're really grateful. We have people that come in, when you talk about quantity, we have people that come in with a handful of spring onions, and we have people that come in and they have to have dollies to bring in their yield. So it's a huge spectrum, but we're grateful for all of it, and we use all of it.
Okay, so I know a lot of home gardeners, they'll plant a few squash or zucchini, and by the end of the season are giving it away. So you guys would be more than happy to take that off of their hands.
We would be thrilled. And a lot of times I think home gardeners feel like there must be some regulation that we can't accept their produce. That's not the case. We're more than able to accept it, distribute it, use it in our kitchen to go out and feed the hungry. We have a wonderful example here of the Jewish Community Center, which has a big garden that they planted expressly to support the hungry.
Oh, wow.
So they bring in large quantities, and then we have, some, like I said, some really cute little people that come in with the abundance of zucchini or the extra cucumbers. We have one woman that has a nut tree and an apricot tree in her yard. She lives in a residential neighborhood here in Tulsa, but every year she calls and she goes, "It's time to come pick," because she, before they were just going into her yard as bird food. So now, she calls us and we go and harvest that for her. And so it's, it's
and
a
nuts
wonderful
are
thing.
expensive, so
Nuts are a great source of protein. They're very expensive. It's pecans.
Yeah.
So we're thrilled with that.
Excellent. So what can somebody do if they're not close to the food bank here? If they're kind of away in a more rural area, how can they help with this problem and get that food from their garden into the food banks?
Unfortunately, hunger spreads throughout our 24 county service area. So if you live in a community and you want to help locally, it's too far to get produce here, you can go on our website or you can call us. We can match you up with a partner that can distribute that produce to the hungry right in your own backyard. Okay. And we'd love that. And, we love getting those calls. And we don't get as many outside of Tulsa, so we were sitting by the phone ready to answer.
Okay, and I believe there's even some tax benefits for people.
Absolutely.
If they donate.
Yes, they can fair market value. It's a tax deduction. We're a 501c3. We can receipt that for the home gardener as easily as we can the corporate donors.
Yeah, so there is some benefit to for both sides.
Benefit to being that kind.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Excellent. So now it doesn't just take those producers to bring food. In order for this to work and successfully distribute the food, you need volunteers and all sorts of things. So if you're not a gardener, how can somebody else get involved?
If you're not a gardener, you can come in and you can still have a produce project. If you think about the groceries that you and I might buy in the store, every time a human hand touches it, the price goes up. So we have volunteers coming in and we get giant totes of apples or grapefruit or onions, and they'll come in and put them in 5 or 10 pound bags for us. We can't afford to buy 5 pound bags of apples, but we can afford the tote. So the human hands make it where we can really get good produce and it can go out in a quantity that's, more manageable for people. So
Fantastic.
That's a wonderful service that the volunteers provide. Those aren't only projects we do, but volunteers are critical to our operation bottom line. Last year, they saved us about $1 million in payroll.
Wow.
I don't have an extra $1 million, so we're very grateful
That's
for that.
That's a vital entity.
It's
the
huge.
Volunteer group, yeah. And you work with all ages and stuff, I believe?
I think on a regular day, volunteers can be as young as 11, but we have family night where 8 and up can come in, and we have projects that are best suited for younger people. But we have a garden here at the food bank that people can come, and you can bring your 3-year-old to come and help pull weeds or, look at worms or plant things. So if you have a really exuberant child who's under 8, there are ways for them to volunteer, just not in the warehouse.
Right, or if you're living in an apartment, you just don't have the space to do a garden, but you want to, you can come down here and help with that.
I would love to hear from those people. Yes, we have a wonderful garden, but it takes constant attention. And so if you have pent-up demand, if you used to garden and you're in an apartment or a smaller home, we can help you with that.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing this with us, and it's a great thing that you guys are doing here.
Thank you for coming out. We really appreciate it.
tomatoes. They're the king of our vegetable garden, and they're something that we can eat year-round, but when we eat one fresh from the garden, we realize the taste is completely different than that from the store-bought. Now, we have to choose from a lot of different varieties, and a lot of times people ask, how do you choose which variety of tomato to plant? So first of all, we've got flavor. When you're choosing a tomato variety based off of flavor, if you read the description either on the plant label or in the seed catalogs, they can read like a wine description, and it might be hard to choose which variety based off of that description. I would encourage you to try a new variety in your garden each year, but if that sounds like a little bit more effort than what you want to do, you might visit a farmer's market where they tend to have a little bit more selection in the tomato varieties that are available to you. And you could sample some of their hard work before you go into growing your own varieties. That's a great way to kind of figure out which might be your favorite tomato. The second thing you want to think about is the function of the plant. Are you looking for one that is going to be a giant slicing tomato, a perfect addition to that hamburger or the sandwich in the summertime? If you are, then one you might want to consider is Brandywine. It's a great tomato that is a nice slicing tomato. We also have beefsteak, which is another large slicing tomato. Now there's another thing you might want to think about if you want a cherry tomato. Some people like to walk through the garden and kind of nibble on some of their produce as they're going through. Sweet 100 is a great option for that, as well as Sun Gold, which is a yellow small cherry tomato. Now keep in mind, when you have more fruit, you're going to have more labor having to pick those off, but they're a nice colorful addition to any summer salad. There are also certain tomato varieties that are better suited if you're going to cook with them. Roma, Milano, and Amish paste are all better if you're going to make a tomato paste or tomato salsa out of these, or tomato sauce. So you might want to look for those varieties if you're planning on cooking with the tomato. The next thing you want to think about is the location in which you're going to plant your tomatoes. If you're in an urban situation and maybe only have a patio garden and looking for something to stay a little bit smaller, you might look for a determinate tomato, and it'll say that on the label, or also known as a bush tomato. Celebrity is a great example of that, and that means that as a determinate tomato, it's only going to grow to a certain height. Now it also means that it'll only produce so much fruit on it as well. Some of your other tomatoes are what are known as indeterminate, and these are going to be more your vining tomatoes. Again, they should say that in the catalog description or on the tag description, whether it is determinate or indeterminate. Now, when you get these that are more of a vining tomato, keep in mind you're going to need to provide them with more structural support and staking to help hold up that plant. But they'll continue to produce all season long for you as long as the environmental conditions are right. The other thing to think about is disease resistance. If you look on the label or again in the plant catalog, it should have some letters and numbers, and that means it has some disease resistance built into the plant. You can see here it says VF1, F2, NTAST, and that means that it has resistance to verticillium wilt, fusarium wilt, races 1 and 2, nematode wilt, tobacco mosaic virus, alternaria stem canker, as well as gray leaf spot. So this plant is going to be more resistant to diseases that you might encounter. And really the best thing to do with some of those diseases that we face is to be proactive and get a disease-resistant plant. But if you're not concerned about that, then you can go with some of the others that may not have that resistance built in. So why does a store-bought tomato taste so much different than a homegrown tomato? Well, it basically has to do with a lot of these factors that we've discussed. Typically, a commercially grown tomato factors in the disease resistance, also the ability for that produce to be transported long distance, and the aesthetics of that produce when it's sitting in the store. I mean, we all learned at an early age that a tomato is supposed to be red, or is it? I know some people that would argue some of their best tasting tomatoes aren't red. In fact, they might be striped, orange, yellow, or even green. This season, I'd encourage you to get out into the nursery and try some different varieties of tomatoes, or perhaps check out some of the produce at your local farmer's market.
come in from the garden or you come home from the market, you usually have to figure out where you're going to store your produce. And surprisingly, not everything goes where most of us put it. So I've got this table full of fruits and vegetables, and we're going to go through some categories and figure out where in general you should be putting them for the best flavor. Now, for other things, you may want to store them in other places, but for the flavor to be maintained for the longest time, we're going to approach it from that angle. So let's kind of go across this way. Here we have beets, and first of all, if you're going to keep them for any length of time, you're going to want to cut the greens off. If you're not going to use them, if you're going to use them within a day or so, then leave the greens on so that you have them ready for cooking with. But these need to go in the refrigerator all the time. Greens off. You could store them separately if you think you may want to use them, but they're going in the refrigerator. On the other hand, melons, which a lot of people are going to put in their refrigerator, actually should go on the kitchen counter always, or in a darker area maybe than the kitchen. But the flavor is going to develop during that relatively short-term storage, because they're not going to keep all that long, maybe just a few days to a week. But you can see that the background on this is pretty green, which would tell you that it's not really ripe yet, that we like to see that more of a flesh-colored or a mellowed-out yellow color. But leave them at room temperature and the flavor is going to be much broader when you eat into them. Eat until they're cut. I will hopefully make that clear. Anytime you cut a piece of produce open, whether it's supposed to be at room temperature or not, it now becomes a refrigerator item. Once it's cut, its protective shields are down, and you've got to do something in addition to help lengthen that storage time and reduce the amount of microbial growth that you're going to get. Greens here, always in the refrigerator. So whether it's any kind of lettuce, this is spinach, but any kind of lettuce or other green, cabbage, all of those are Brussels sprouts, everything like that is going to go into the refrigerator. The same with broccoli. It's another green, it's in that same cabbage family. It's also going to go in the refrigerator all the time. This is a group that's going to go at room temperature, never in the refrigerator. Potatoes are going to develop more sugar during refrigerator storage. They're then going to be too sweet for many of the uses that we have. Sweet potatoes are room temperature, onions are room temperature. Carrots, on the other hand, are a refrigerator item from the moment you bring them home. This pineapple, however, is one that you're going to leave at room temperature until you're ready to cut it. And so one of the things I find is that I keep it right inside the door when I come in. I've got a relatively small room there. I leave it on the counter there. And when I come in the door after work and the whole area smells like pineapple, it's ripe. What you're looking for here is not whether or not the leaves are going to pull out. That's not a sign of ripeness. What is a sign when you're in the market looking for them, because most of us don't grow them in our own gardens, is to look at the eyes and make sure that they're all uniform. They don't have to be the yellow color, but they do need to be fairly uniform, and then you're going to get a better pineapple than you would otherwise. Then let it sit until you begin to smell it. Also check it to make sure that it's usually you're going to have them sitting like this on the counter. Check that to make sure you're not getting any mold growth. That would also be a bad sign. So just because you're leaving things at room temperature, it actually increases your responsibility to be checking on them more frequently than maybe if you shove them all in the refrigerator. Mushrooms, down here we have some cremini mushrooms. Those are any type of mushroom, unless they're dried. Those are going to be in the refrigerator all the time. Bananas, however, this is something similar to pineapple from the standpoint of that they're tropical. Mangoes over here would be another one that would go in that category. What we see is that if we put these things into the refrigerator, particularly before they're ripe, it actually, because they're used to warmer temperatures, it does some cold damage to them. So if you're ever in the market and you're looking at bananas and you see that the background tone, instead of being yellow or green, is actually kind of gray, that's a sign that it's had some cold damage. It hasn't been frozen, but it's been damaged to some degree, and the flavor is never going to develop for you the way it will if you're leaving it sit on the kitchen counter. Oranges, these are room temperature storage, at least until they're very ripe, at which point you would put them in the refrigerator. Apples are an interesting one. I've got 2 apples here for a reason. For the first 7 days, apples can just fine go at room temperature storage. after 7 days, then they should go in the refrigerator. So it kind of depends on what your intended use is. If you want to have a nice fruit bowl, which a lot of these would look lovely in a fruit bowl, then these could be used in that fruit bowl for a while along with the bananas. But then after about a week, you want to put them in the refrigerator so that you've got a longer life on them. Kind of the same with avocados. These room temperature until they're ripened. A lot of times with something like this and also a pear, you need to leave them at room temperature storage until they're ripe. So again, this requires you to go back and check on them daily pretty much to make sure that they're starting to ripen, and then you can put them in the refrigerator to extend their shelf life or their storage time. One of the things that you can help you with that ripening process is to put them in a brown paper bag that you fold over, and that will keep the gases around them. That will help with ripening. I already mentioned mango. It's going to go in the refrigerator. A lot of times I see people, touching and squeezing every single mango in the market. As long as they're heavy for their size, you can take them home and ripen them in that brown paper bag. Once they're ripe, they can go into the refrigerator. Tomatoes. Tomatoes are a never in the refrigerator item, no matter what variety, no matter what size, whether it's the cherry tomatoes or the grape tomatoes or the beefsteak tomatoes, they should be at room temperature for storage. The refrigerator temperatures really kill the flavor. It also can damage the texture on those. They tend to become more mealy, so keep them at room temperature. One of the other things that I haven't mentioned is these are tomatoes from the market as opposed to some that we grew. They have a sticker on them, and most of the produce, if you buy it at the market, will have a sticker on it. And if it's a hard shelled item, I take the sticker off right away. If, however, it's something soft like a tomato or an apple, I'll leave that sticker on until I'm ready to wash them. Most produce, with the exception of greens, you wash when you're ready to use them. It keeps them drier, reduces the probability that you're going to get microbial growth like mold and other things on the outside. The stickers are edible, so you could approach it that way. But if you try to peel it off, it's going to, no matter how careful you are with your fingernail or your very thin knife, you're going to damage the produce and you're going to leave a bruise there. So if you do it right before you're ready to use it, you're less apt to have that damage actually show up on the table than if I did it today and didn't use it for 4 or 5 more days. So room temperature storage, leave the stickers on until you're ready to wash them. Hopefully when you're washing them, you'll notice and say, hey, there's a sticker there, and take it off before you actually slice it and eat it. Again, they are edible if you do. I hope this gives you a little bit of a clue as to how you should be arranging your storage of produce when you come in from the garden, come home from the market. Until next time, I'm Barbara Brown for Oklahoma Gardening.
There are lots of great horticultural events this time of year. Be sure and consider these activities when you're making your plans for the weeks ahead. Next week, we visit Greenleaf Nursery Company in Park Hill, Oklahoma, where they produce millions of plants each year from over 1,000 plant varieties. Extension entomologist Eric Rebeck has information about the threat of emerald ash borer in Oklahoma. And we get to see a unique high-tech shipping container garden at the Food Bank of Eastern Oklahoma. Be sure to join us next week for more TV You'll Grow to Love. To find out more information about show topics, as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure and visit our website, oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussions on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows, as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater jewel. We wish to thank our generous underwriters, TLC Garden Centers, Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is provided by Pond Pro Shops, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, and the Oklahoma Horticultural Society. We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.